Today is the second day of the 7-day November 1984 retreat. We will talk about the self, self-centeredness, self-image, selfishness. It comes up so much in meetings. And very likely outside of meetings. Before we get to that, we'll take up two questions which came up in meetings, not verbally formulated, quoted. That's not the important thing. The important thing is to make a question which can be generally understood and investigated by all of us. One person said something like this: "You talk so often about being with what comes up or seeing what comes up without attaching oneself to it or abandoning it, avoiding it. Don't exactly know what that means," said this person. So much stuff comes up, which one has been through so many times. Not avoiding it doesn't mean to go through it again. It depends what this stuff is that comes up, or that one comes upon, because very often pains or tensions are there, but one has ignored them up to a point when they come into awareness or are felt all of a sudden. Somehow a numbness has lifted, and one is in touch with all kinds of pains or tensions. If that is what comes up, not avoiding it means not putting down the veil of numbness again, ignoring it or escaping into some kind of a train of thought that is more pleasurable than feeling the pain or the numbness, for that matter, or the tension, as it presents itself, as it manifests itself, without knowing it. This is, now I remember, several retreats ago this started, and it was terrible. Now it comes again. I know it took me so long to get through it. I never really ever got through it. And now this again, where I was just beginning to have some energy, or this is how one feels so often. All of this kind of reasoning is escape already, separation. The thing is there. And it's no big deal to feel it. It's there, and the feelings are there. The nerves are conducting, provided there is no numbness. There's no step from here to there. That's thought. I must now get in touch with that. Thought can create any kind of gaps and any kind of bridges. But in truth, there are no gaps. There's pain. And if it's not called pain, linking it up with all the remembered stuff of the past, the word meaning linking it up, then, what is this? And being that, these are words. Doing it or being it is the real thing. What one probably has been through time and time again is thinking about it. A past incident may have been of short or long duration which has caused considerable upset or pain or hurt. And the remembrance of it doesn't let go of one, as it were. Somehow or other, it's like a magnet. It keeps attracting the mind to think through it again and again and again. Relive it in thought with all the same emotions of anger, hurt, upset. And this is probably what the person was referring to. This rethinking of the past incident or the past events, what this led up to, seems so futile when it's caught in a loop. Thinking about it in a grooved way sheds no new insight on the incident. There's no renewal in that, or no dropping it. It just goes around and around and around and grinds on the mind and body. No, this is not meant in saying don't abandon, get yourself into that loop. Of course not. It's not meant. Rather, see at a glance, if possible, that there is this loop one has been caught up in time and time again, and see it and therefore not get into it. Is that possible? The pain that the thoughts have aroused, the past incident or incidents have aroused, it's there. One senses it. And there to be careful not to brace against it or separate oneself from it in any way through thinking or some kind of physical maneuvers of closing up, tensing against it. All of that is open to discovery that it does happen, to a mind that is really interested in feeling and experiencing what is there. Not to make an experience out of it, but to feel it, to sense it. Not to separate from it. And yet not make a big thing out of it either. So that it becomes the content of one's sitting, to feel that pain. Then one has a purpose in life again. And even though it's painful, one can have a feeling of, yeah, I'm doing something. I'm one with my pain. And there can be also the quite gratifying role to human beings of being a victim. The image of being a victim of pain, of past hurts, and now feeling them. So many religious ethics that teach that pain is good for one. We've all been brought up in it to one extent or another. On the one hand, to take aspirins immediately when the pain comes, or pain is good for me, it must lead to something better if I stick with it. To guard against this, guarding meaning to see if this is what actually takes place in the mind, that these thoughts are there. And a mind that is pliable, open, light, sensitive, discovers this, comes upon these thoughts. They're there. And is not caught in it. So how can pain or tension be felt without its becoming something, or one becoming something and feeling it? Somebody. Isn't it when the mind again quiets down in this fine listening, doesn't want to achieve anything. It doesn't even want to do anything. Listening isn't doing. Listening is listening or attending, questioning. And to be in touch with the subtlest of motions and movements and ongoings in this body-mind needs this subtlest of attention. In which every movement away is detected. Once a thought loop takes over, that's the end of attention. Then one is caught up in that. When there's a coming to, can one abstain from gross and subtle self-reprimands to see them as another loop? Just not enter into it and listen anew. There's the breathing, the heart, all what's there physically doesn't need to be named at all, and all the sounds and motions outside. Whatever's there, what is it? Meaning, let me listen. Be quiet so I can listen. Not to something, but listening. And then the pain is no different from this car there going by, whatever it was. The dog barking. The breathing. Or the question, who or mu? When it is not asked with a special intent or wanting an experience or an answer. When it is just the expression of the state of listening and not knowing. One person said, doing sitting at home and here at retreat, I understand the value of retreat. I need to come to it. And yet, sitting retreat or sitting at home, I don't really see how this can help the people in Nicaragua or Ethiopia or India, Poland. We do something and we, by training, by habit, want to see results. Actually, this person said, I have not even seen a deep transformation in myself. And how can this help people around the world who are in such incredible suffering and sorrow? It's a fact that human beings throughout the world are engulfed in what seems a huge wave, tidal wave of violence and sorrow and selfishness. Selfishness very likely being at the root of it all. Even in areas where there's natural disaster like the drought throughout Africa, there is enough know-how and food in the world to feed all people, if it wasn't for the difficulty of political and nationalistic division and all the systems that go with it, systems of power and graft. But this tidal wave of violence, destruction, and sorrow is not out there. We're not apart from it. And to really, before jumping into action, not that one doesn't send food, if one can, whether it'll get there, one doesn't know. It may not. That's what one hears and sees all the time. It does not get most of the time to the people in the right shape and form. And also people want more than food. They want to grow it themselves, take care of themselves. But this urge to do something, to assuage the pain of guilt, or the pain at hearing all this that one feels, really we want to be rid of that, and that's why we want quick action. Just as much as we want the people to be helped, we also don't want to have these constant reminders of what goes on in the world. But rather than going along with this habitual urge to do something about it, let's join something or form something to do something, how does one live oneself? With one's husband or wife or children, the people one works with. This question is asked over and over again. And please don't just listen to the words and dismiss it because it's so nauseating to hear the same words over and over again. But let this question come up as you do interrelate at a moment in your daily life, or now you're not so much interrelating but just sitting. Let the question sink in so that it starts operating, so one starts looking. It is worthwhile. Not to ask the question and to give oneself answers what one has learned and found out in the past and labeling oneself this or that, but as it happens to be there, to for the first time hear oneself talk, hear the sound of one's voice. It's an incredible discovery when this happens for the first time. Without being personal about it, one hears this voice, and all of a sudden one may understand why people react the way they do, or don't react, the way one wants them to react. The way one looks and gestures, steps in and out. When awareness starts to come up like the sun there, comes over the hill and illumines everything, every little wave, every little leaf that's on the ground and twig that's dancing about, everything is illumined. Then there's a possibility for change, real change in relationship. And when something changes here, it also changes there. It may not. One doesn't do it in order to effect change. One does it because one needs to understand on the smallest level, namely here, how this human mind works and functions and affects other human minds and people. It is so tremendously important and worthwhile, and what else is there to do? But for one human being to completely understand himself or herself from moment to moment. Light being shed on words and actions and reactions, inner feelings, outer movements and gestures. And in that light being shed there, resulting or coming into being a lightness, not a stuckness, which is our habitual defense, justifying or attacking back, revenge. All of these things which are magnified in these world conflagrations, but they're starting right in individual relationship. And not to shut the news out, even though one doesn't need to watch it from morning till night, but to be aware of what is going on throughout the world and in one's neighborhood or in the streets through which one walks or travels, in the people's faces with whom one comes in contact. They speak volumes. And to be in touch with that, to feel that in the same way as we talked about before, feel a pain when the numbness lifts. We're also numb to other people's pains because it seems too much to bear, too much to cope with. But it is not too much, it's there. It needs to be touched and felt with lightness. Meaning with understanding from inside how it all comes about, maintains itself, is strengthened and perpetuated, and can also come to an end if one understands in oneself how selfishness can be gone. Not that it has been transformed into something else. Either it's there or it is not there. And when it is not there, then there may be something which we call love, not the overused concept of love, or I give you something and you give me something, mutual care, tenderness, or dependency, usually restricted to few people for whom this love is reserved, as it were. But a love that is not for this or this, it is there. Compassion is the other word, meaning passion with everyone in sorrow. Or joy. But this love doesn't come up. It stays away. It's not there when there's this concern with one's own worries, problems, desires, fears, advancements, improvements, betterment. And the thought is in full gear, in imagery. Or if one thinks, how can we have a master plan for helping the people of this nation or that nation, then there may be, again, a lot of thought and intellectual attempts to solve a problem. But not this love and compassion, which may have no plan at all. Maybe it can't have a plan. It just acts. All of what we've said already touches on this self, this thing of self. Maybe we'll look a little bit at what is the self. There's no one here who hasn't been in touch with it, felt it, seen its ways. It is the feeling of there being something permanent, or a little bit more permanent than everything else within me. Something that continues, and something that, put in the dualistic way in which we feel about ourselves, that I want to continue. I want to be happy, to be well, to get on, to become something. It is a thought creation. Without thought, there is no self. You may say, well, wait a minute, there are a lot of feelings, emotions connected with a self, but if you investigate very carefully, as you live from moment to moment, if jealousy arises, thoughts have triggered it. Thoughts about oneself, one's own inadequacy in comparison with someone else who seems to be able to have it because, well, doesn't matter why. Thoughts and images are trigger emotions. All our thoughts, which come from memories, are wired via the nervous system to our organs and muscles and centers where emotions originate, physical centers. The feeling of jealousy, the pain in the pit of the stomach or wherever one feels it, may go on longer than the thought. But the thought has triggered it, and the feeling may trigger new thoughts. Does one see that the idea or image of oneself is a creation of thought? Or are these just words? Maybe at this moment they're just words, but maybe there'll be a moment if one looks and wonders and attends, where this will be crystal clear. There's this image of myself as being this, and how good I feel about it, or how bad I feel about it, being that. Whereas what actually happened was a picture in the mind. And someone may hurt one, say something about one that does not fit with this picture idea of oneself, and then there's defensiveness, anger, an immediate urge for revenge or withdrawal into feelings of hurt. If one could only see that this is pictures doing this, or ideas, which if they're not there, if they're not used to hide behind or cling to or represent oneself, if they're not there, then one wouldn't even be hurt if somebody said something to one. You say this is theoretical, idealistic, but it is open to experimentation. Because you say, how can I be free of an idea or picture of myself? That's another picture in the wings, the one who is free of it. It's a matter of attention. And energy gathering in this attention. Attention needs no pictures. That's the beauty of it. It needs nothing. It can just listen, attend, and respond or not respond as needed. It doesn't need a picture of itself. And therefore it can't be hurt. When there's a state of attention, there needs to be no hurt. One just hears what the person said, listens, and also sees where the person is coming from. It sounds so simple. It could be so simple. Why do we complicate it so much? Why we are so attached to images of ourselves, which create all this incredible vulnerability. Not only when other people hurt us or blame us, but we ourselves blame ourselves. Because we have many conflicting images of ourselves. We would like to be this way, but we also want to be that way. And then we act in a third way, which is incompatible with both. And then we blame ourselves for it. and feeling depressed over all this guilt over how we are, we try to forget about ourselves and go out and have a good time or something. That's why drink and drugs or things have such a tremendous appeal, because maybe for a while one can drop all the pictures, but then the mind is not very clear, sort of drowned in the stuff. Why does one think one needs something permanent and makes this feeling, this idea of me, the permanent thing, the most permanent thing? Maybe one also has an idea of God, which one makes into an even more permanent thing, to give some solace and comfort and strength to the ever shaky feeling of the me. First of all, it is so incredibly habitual and age-old. It permeates all human beings like a current, this current of me being me, with all its wants and desires, escapes, fears. It's like a current that permeates all human beings, whether they're here, north, west, south, east. The feeling of me and not me, me and you, is there in every human being. Maybe with a few exceptions. I don't know. And in that we don't differ from each other at all. We may differ in the form in which we express our self-feeling, in our particular goals, ambitions, or what we want to become, how we want to be like. That changes. Each region and area and country has its own tradition of images for its citizens. But images there are. And the protectiveness of it there is everywhere, else we wouldn't have wars and clashes and feuds. Yeah, it's this current that runs through human beings, has run through human beings since time immemorial. Me and mine versus you and yours. The protection of it, wanting to enlarge it, the more, wanting to have more of it. The security in it. Wanting to be better than someone else, either as an individual or as a group. And finding pleasure in this being better, finding pleasure in comparison. It's so totally universal, even though the expressions, the forms vary. And yet we feel so strongly connected with this image of me that we're separate individuals. We feel that, don't we? Opposing others or being opposed by others. Not understood by others, having to fight for oneself. All in this little realm of one's ideas, past experiences and memories, which have come to one through the group with which one has lived, the family, and the family within the particular culture, the particular time of in which we live. What's individual about our thoughts and opinions and ideas? What's separate about them? Where we've got them from? We've got them from others, and they've got them from others. There may be sometimes a reshuffling, rearranging of thoughts or opinions. Maybe somebody at some time sees something new, but it becomes a thought. It becomes a concept, a memory, and then others incorporate it. What do we base this feeling on, that we're so special, so different, so individual? In comparison to others. If one watches how children grow up, how they get their words, their ideas, their attitudes from their parents and from their playmates, one sees this this feeling of self developing. And yet one sees there's nothing individual about it. It is what is being absorbed, imitated, taken over, and then put forth as mine, my ideas, my ways, my opinions, my toys. One looks at that and really has insight into it, there comes a feeling of humbleness or humility. Being nobody special. Seeing how one's thoughts, ideas, one's tastes, talents have come down to us through tradition, inheritance, acculturation. As they have come down to everyone else through the same process. And one may also understand more and more clearly how this clinging to the idea of being a separate, special, individual self is the essence of loneliness, of separation and division. Because it needs defense, protection, and clamors for aggrandizement, for the more. It's all inherent in the feeling of self. Because it is just a thought creation, apart from the whole. And as we said before, not just one image one has of oneself, but many contradictory ones. Many contradictory desires which clash. That's what contradictory means. They don't, not unified. And then comes the wanting to unify all of this, as one person put it. How can I I need to integrate all of these different parts. But who is the integrator? What is the integrator? That's another part. A super part, designating itself to do the job of integrating. But why do there need to be any parts? What is their substance? Where do they come from? One doesn't have to answer all these questions, but they can be put. And then can one observe in the light of these questions what goes on from moment to moment, with an observation or a perception that is free of parts. It's innocent of any part. Doesn't try to integrate or bring together. It just sees. And sitting, listening, looking, attending, questioning who or mu. All of what has been talked about is revealed at one moment, one time or another, or at one glance. One person said in questioning who, as always wanting an answer, wanting some resolution, some solution, some answer. Can you see that? As it happens, that's enough for that instant. But our habitual ways are, I shouldn't be. I've heard her say there shouldn't be expecting an answer, there shouldn't be expectation. See that that happens too. Question the whole ongoing process of this mind and brain and body. Questioning meaning not taking it for granted, not saying it's human nature, it has to be this way, can't be any different. But, what is it? And listening to it without doing anything about it. Perception or attention, whatever we want to call it, awareness has its own action. It's the action of not accumulating, not carrying around, storing up, but seeing and dropping. Thinking can drop, thinking goes in loops and stores memories. It Attention doesn't store. It's a completely different process. Just sees from moment to moment. There's no time to store. There's no time. There's only what is. One person said in a meeting, all I see is selfishness. It seems to be there all the time. And this person added, it's a relief to see as one is rather than being constantly engaged in pretending one is something else, one is different. Which is how most of our energies are employed for pretending we're this or that or becoming that, rather than seeing how we are. But if one draws this conclusion, if this person drew this conclusion, since all there is seen is selfishness, it must be there to stay. Must be immovable, unalterable. Then one is stuck. And I'm not saying that this was the person's conclusion, but one can come to that. Particularly if, as this person mentioned, there's a lot of pleasure in that. And this is why it's so consistent, so persevering. So much pleasure in it. There was also an honest understanding of that. But there's not only pleasure in it. One doesn't cut the observation off at that point. All feelings of loneliness, separation, and isolation, and the ache of that, comes from the sense of self. Comes from no place else. And the sense of self comes from thoughts, images, past experiences, memories, and all the feelings that those trigger throughout the body, and the habits that this has engendered in one. But these are just words and explanations and descriptions. And even though the description and explanation may be very clear, it doesn't mean that one clearly sees an image when it starts working in defense or aggression. That has to be directly come upon. And at that moment, it loses its power. If it's really seen, one can't continue with it. It's so ridiculous. Ridiculous and yet so grave in its consequences, in how it affects other people and oneself. Because then one has to feel guilty over it. The whole thing. How does attention happen, or awareness, or a pure perception come into operation? I don't know. I really don't know. And yet it's so clear that one can become aware that one is greedy or angry, very often afterwards, but it's not impossible to become aware of it as it happens, One can be aware that one is walking, particularly in a retreat where there's so much quietness, inwardness. And it doesn't matter where it comes from. This is, again, maybe an escape to think about it. Could it come to me? Do I have that? We don't know. Each one of us is free to ask, what is reality or truth or awareness, or who am I? Or what is this state which I have so many explanations and words for, but have never been in touch with? And then listen. If only for a fraction of a second, it doesn't matter, the length of time, we will not fret over. When one takes a walk, walking through the leaves up the forest, can there be listening for a moment of no time? One can't intend it. Listening is either there or it is not there. But there can be a real yearning, a real intention to find out about oneself. If one understands, beginning with intellectual understanding, the tremendous need for a human being to understand himself. So one is not caught in this tidal wave of human destruction, violence, insensitivity, and sorrow that seems to sweep the world. Wherever human beings don't understand themselves, live in ignorance of who and what they are from moment to moment. What are we from moment to moment? We'll end here for today.